What's it like for you to be on the red carpet at the Grammys after, a career? Everyone thinks of you as an overnight success, but it's been a while.
Well, I'm up for Best Songwriter tonight, and I've been writing songs since I was 12, so it's really exciting for me.
It's all great. It's great to have your career take off and to have those blessings. But if you don't take care of yourself, and that's if you ever see any celebrities and you're like, they looked so happy. How did they crash and burn? How did that happen? That's why, because they gave and gave and they never gave back to themselves.
Yeah. There was a period where you didn't know if you'd make more music.
Yeah.
Yes,
That right? Yeah, that's true. I kind of go through that. I write all my songs. It's really a part of who I am.
Yeah.
I don't see it so much as a job. It's really just a part of me. So I take my time,
Yeah.
I admired artists maybe Sade. She goes away for a decade, comes back,
Yes.
I think it's okay to take your time.
Yeah.
When talking about the 2000s and music that was popular among the mainstream general public, many artists often come up in the conversation of who were some of the best. Artists who made such a prominent impact that their name and music are practically branded next to the phrase 2000s pop culture. Many people will name Britney Spears, Beyonce, Pink, Avril Lavigne, Justin Timberlake, Fergie, Alicia Keys, Christina Aguilera, Usher, and Adele, just to name a few. A select audience out there might name drop one of the many popular bands of the 2000s such as Linkin Park, Evanescence, Coldplay, Fall Out Boy, and even Nickelback. Yes, I said Nickelback. But then there's a subset of artists that get brought up in the conversation, but always as an afterthought. They're a household name, and they've left an undeniable impact, but for one reason or another, just don't seem to get the proper amount of credit or kudos. Think of people like Ashanti, Natasha Bedingfield, Mike Posner, Carly Rae Jepsen, or Leona Lewis. They're great singers, they've had multiple hits, they may have won a Grammy or two, but they just seem to evade recognition for their cultural impact. To me, the most glaring example of an underrated household name of the 2000s is Nelly Furtado. An irrefutable hitmaker in her own right, Nelly Furtado is one of the most formative artists of 2000s pop music and some of the later trends within mainstream music as a whole. Multi-platinum #1 hits, a Grammy, and some of the most iconic songs of the 21st century thus far, all done within a short period of a few years. At the top of the music industry, and then she left. While a few of the aforementioned artists were able to find success in the 2010s and onward, several of the artists I just mentioned either had a gradual, rocky, or non-existent presence in the 2010s. Nelly Furtado doesn't really fit any of the boxes that most of those 2000s artists do, considering she willingly took a hiatus from music and the public eye. Nelly Furtado has never had a major public controversy, she isn't unhinged on her social media, or getting into Twitter fights with other celebrities and fans. There's no old videos of Nelly Furtado resurfacing of her doing or saying questionable things that the general public would deem problematic. She even turned down $500,000 to pose for Playboy when she was 22. In fact, for a majority of her career, she has lived a very private life away from the spotlight as a mother of 3 children, with stable relationships, and her focus on activism and philanthropy. It's nearly impossible to find a negative word about Nelly Furtado online, with the most negative criticism about her being that her music is overplayed or that it sounds generic, which isn't really a critique of Nelly, more so a comment on maybe how simple her music can be interpreted on a surface level. But that's the beauty of Nelly Furtado. She's always handled fame just like she has with her music. It's always on her own terms. The simplicity in Nelly Furtado's lyrics only serves to enhance the uniquely crafted and timeless beats and melodies her music has come to be known for. Despite Nelly Furtado only being in the mainstream public view from arguably the year 2000 until 2009, her cultural impact can't be, but too often is, understated. With her 7th studio album coming out today, September 20th, 2024, this feels like the perfect time to pay Nelly Furtado her overdue flowers. Considering how Katy Perry's recent music revival is underperforming, and considering Katy and Nelly both have new albums coming out today, it will be interesting to see how they are both received by the John Q public. Through Nelly Furtado's upbringing, discography, and personal life outside of music, I want to analyze and reflect on the cultural impact of Nelly Furtado. I want to view Nelly Furtado's career through the lens of the music industry, the unfair expectations set against Nelly and women in music in general, and a look at where Nelly may be headed next. Nelly Kim Furtado was born on December 2nd, 1978 in Victoria, British Columbia, Canada. Nelly's parents, Antonio Jose Furtado and Maria Manuela Furtado, are both Portuguese and were born on São Miguel Island in the autonomous Azores region of Portugal. Both of them eventually moved to Canada in the late 1960s. Nelly's parents named her after the 5-time Olympic gold medalist, Soviet gymnast, Nelly Kim. She is the youngest of 3 kids, with an older brother named Michael, an older sister named Lisa Ann. Nelly and her siblings were raised in a very average Roman Catholic home. The family went to church every Sunday, where Nelly gained exposure to the church choir. Nelly was raised in a dual lingual household, and by 4 years old was able to speak and sing in Portuguese, performing in public not long after. Furtado's first public performance was when she duetted with her mother at church on Portugal Day. Nelly just had an inclination to sing. She was a naturally gifted performer from a young age.
Well, it started like that when I was young, and then I was, privileged enough to speak English at home. And then go to Portuguese school at night. My mom, took the liberty of putting us in Portuguese school and making sure we learned about our culture. So already singing in 2 languages opens your mind up a lot.
The duet with her mother at church left a profound impact on her. She didn't have stage fright, and she wasn't scared to perform in front of large crowds. In a 2008 interview with Daily Music Guide, Nelly stated, "I just love being on stage. I loved the reaction from the crowd. I loved the excitement. I loved the fact that I was spreading positive energy. I already could see myself performing for thousands that very first day when I was only 4, so it was never in question. I knew that I'd be doing it for a living." Around 9 to 10 years old, Nelly began learning the ukulele and trombone, and then later learned how to play the recorder, keyboard, and guitar. Around age 12, Nelly began songwriting and joined a Portuguese marching band during her weeknights. During her primary school and secondary school summers, Nelly was helping her mom alongside her siblings as a chambermaid in her hometown of Victoria, British Columbia. Around the same age as she began her songwriting, Nelly's fascination with hip-hop and rap began. She would spend hours in her room listening to urban and hip-hop music. Nelly moved in with her older sister Lisa Ann in Toronto after graduating from Mount Douglas Secondary School in Saanich, British Columbia in 1996. Nelly's parents wanted her to go to college, but ultimately supported Nelly's dream of pursuing music in Toronto. While there, she worked a full-time job at an alarm company. During the 1-year time she worked at the alarm company, she would meet Tallis Newkirk, a founding member of the Toronto-based hip-hop group Planes of Fascination. Nelly eventually contributed vocals to their album Join the Ranks on the song Waitin' for the Streets in 1996. The very next year, she formed the hip-hop duo Nell Star with Tallis Newkirk. However, the duo was short-lived as the hip-hop style didn't really suit Nelly's personality and didn't provide enough opportunities for her to flex her vocal chops. Nelly eventually split from the group and was back on track to performing as a solo artist. At the Honey Jam concert show in 1997, an annual all-female concert in Ontario, Canada to recognize up-and-coming female Canadian artists, Nelly was one of the performers represented. Unbeknownst to her, she was performing in front of Gerald Eaton of the Canadian R&B rock band The Philosopher Kings, who immediately wanted Nelly to co-write music with him. Gerald Eaton and fellow Philosopher Kings band member Brian West would help Nelly produce demos to help sign her to a label. After several writing and recording sessions, Nelly's demo was given to several record companies, eventually leading to Nelly being signed to DreamWorks Records in early 1999. Her first single, titled Party's Just Begun Again, was released later that year, which was included on the soundtrack for the god-awful 1999 American crime drama Broke Down Palace. Collaborating with Eaton and West proved to be pivotal for Nelly, as they would eventually co-write and co-produce almost half of her debut album. And on October 24, 2000, at just 21 years old, Nelly Furtado released her debut studio album titled Woah, Nelly. Released under DreamWorks Records, Woah, Nelly was promoted by 4 singles, 2 of which became massive successes. The singles Hey Man and Shit on the Radio were well received, but Nelly's other 2 singles, titled I'm Like a Bird and Turn Off the Light, would become chart-topping worldwide hits. Woah, Nelly peaked at number 2 in her home country of Canada, and a modest number 24 on the US Billboard Hot 200 albums chart, eventually going double platinum in the United States alone by the end of 2002, and at least 7 times platinum worldwide worldwide by 2006. After releasing Woah Nelly, she began her first solo tour with the Burn in the Spotlight tour, having 90 shows across 5 different leg tours to promote the album. Woah Nelly caught the eye of Timbaland, who would sign Nelly to his record label Mosley Music Group after feeling that she had an incredibly unique sound. Woah Nelly was positively received overall, garnering a 79 Metacritic average, with critics praising not only Nelly's vocals, but the relatability of her lyrics and alternative pop sound. Nelly has stated in interviews that she wanted Woah Nelly to be a heartfelt and genuine album, not overproduced pop with no story to tell. When listening to Woah Nelly, you feel the authenticity in Nelly's lyrics, as well as the sense of adventure and impassioned emotion. At the 44th Grammys in February 2002, Nelly was up for 4 awards, including Best Female Pop Vocal Performance and Song of the Year for I'm Like a Bird, Pop Vocal Album for Woah Nelly, and Best New Artist. Nelly lost Song of the Year and Best New Artist to Alicia Keys. She lost Pop Vocal Album to Sade, but Nelly did win her first and to date only Grammy for Best Pop Vocal Performance for I'm Like a Bird. In September 2003, Nelly gave birth to her first daughter with her boyfriend at the time named Jasper Gahunia. For Nelly's second album, she wanted to stay true to her authentic storytelling style and make an album reflective of her upbringing. She opted for a more pop rock sound with more ethnic and worldly elements than her first album, Woah Nelly. Inspired by the story of her parents immigrating to Canada from Portugal, Nelly Furtado released her second studio album titled Folklore on November 5, 2003. Nelly collaborated with Eaton and West once again for her album Folklore, although, despite this, Folklore was not as positively received as Woah Nelly was. Critics were divided on what to make of the album. Some critics felt as if the worldly elements and beats used throughout the album were too much and took away from the very true-to-life authenticity that was coming through Nelly's lyrics. Critics appreciated the cohesion and melodic flow of the album, but don't make any mistakes. There were no critics saying Folklore was better than Woah Nelly. Folklore ultimately peaked at number 38 on the US Billboard 200 albums chart. To be fair, Folklore wasn't as widely promoted as Woah Nelly because Nelly's label, DreamWorks Records, was sold to Universal Music Group while Folklore was being released. DreamWorks Records shut down and absorbed into Geffen Records in 2005, bringing several prominent artists like Nelly to its roster. As a whole, Folklore is a nice addition to Nelly's discography, and as of 2008 data, Folklore has sold at least 2 million copies worldwide. But critics wanted a more pop-driven sound. Critics loved her lyrics and hip-hop-driven style, but they wanted more, and for her third studio album, boy did Nelly give it to them. Nelly was fully aware that critics weren't receptive to her softer, experimental side in music, so she decided to lean into exactly what she knew critics wanted.
Am I throwing you off?
Nope.
Didn't think so.
Nelly's first single for her third studio album was titled Promiscuous, released on April 25, 2006, which became an immediate dance club hit. And just 6 weeks later, Promiscuous became Nelly Furtado's first Billboard #1 hit on the Hot 100, staying there for a total of 6 weeks. Promiscuous was already proving to Nelly's critics that the flop of Folklore was a fluke, and that she was about to take over mainstream music. Nelly's second single, Maneater, was released on May 26, 2006, and is my personal favorite song of Nelly Furtado's. Unfortunately, Maneater was overshadowed by the success of Promiscuous and became a bigger hit outside of the United States throughout Europe, mainly in the United Kingdom, where it reached #1. Maneater reached a peak of number 16 on the Billboard Hot 100, which I honestly don't think is fair, but then again, Stereo Love also reached a peak of number 16, so maybe it's a spot only reserved for robbed, iconic songs. Just before Promiscuous reached #1, Nelly Furtado released her third studio album titled Loose under Geffen Records and Mosley Music Group on June 20th, 2006. Loose was everything the public didn't know they needed and everything critics wanted. A primarily pop album with elements of hip-hop, R&B, synth, reggaeton, and funk throughout the album. Nearly entirely co-written and co-produced by Timbaland, Loose had an electrifying and magnetic soundscape. With fluid themes of female sexuality and promiscuity, Loose feels liberating in that it is littered with tracks that make you want to get up and dance. The album feels emotionally and physically infectious, and each track has a completely unique but engaging sound. In a 2010 interview with Pop Matters, Nelly stated that Loose was 90% written with a beat first, and then I'd write my melodies and songs to the beat. And I think this encapsulates the feel of the album as well. Every song off of Loose is delicately crafted with the finest touch. In October of 2006, Nelly began her Get Loose tour to promote her album. Less than 2 weeks after the tour began, Nelly's third single, Say It Right, was released on Halloween of 2006, becoming an immediate smash hit. Say It Right became Nelly Furtado's second #1 hit on the Billboard Hot 100 in February of 2007. Undoubtedly one of Nelly Furtado's most famous songs, Say It Right remains one of the most successful singles of the 21st century, next to Promiscuous. As an album, Loose was monumentally successful both critically and commercially. The album debuted at #1 on the Billboard 200 albums chart, making it Nelly's first #1 album. Loose received a Metacritic average score of 71 out of 100, indicating generally positive reviews. Loose did have criticism from some who felt as if Nelly was trying to sell more records by releasing music and accompanying music videos that were more overtly sexual in nature than her previous projects. Despite criticisms, Loose peaked at #1 in at least a dozen countries throughout Europe and Asia, and as of 2020, it has sold more than 12 million copies worldwide, making it one of the best-selling albums of the 2000s. On February 6, 2007, the first collaboration between Nelly Furtado, Timbaland, and Justin Timberlake would be released with the song Give It To Me. The song became an instant club classic and immediately shot to #1 on the Billboard Hot 100, becoming Nelly's third #1 hit. While on the Get Loose tour, Nelly suffered a breakdown on stage, crying through most of her set. Overworked from the constant touring and promotion while raising her daughter on the road was emotionally taxing in a way that Nelly wasn't prepared for. It made her realize that having a family and an at-home experience was what she really wanted, and that the Hollywood limelight was becoming too much for her. Nelly felt like the people around her only liked and wanted her for her fame and money, and it ruined her self-image, going on stage to perform, but crying herself to sleep when the curtain falls. Luckily for Nelly, just 4 days after the conclusion of the Get Loose tour on July 19, 2008, Nelly married Damasio Castellone, who was a sound engineer that she met while working on Loose. For Nelly's fourth album, she wanted to take a different pivot within her music. Loose was so successful and mainstream that she wanted to release a more personal project as her next album. Released under her own record label of Nelstar Entertainment on September 11, 2009, Nelly Furtado's fourth studio album titled Mi Plan debuted. Mi Plan is the first Spanish-language album and first independent album released for Nelly Furtado. It's difficult to measure how Mi Plan compares to every other album in Nelly Furtado's discography. Critics were generally positively receptive to the album, in particular Nelly's vocals, but critics noted that Timbaland's influence was needed on the album, citing how the songs lacked overall cohesion and that signature Timbaland touch. Mi Plan eventually reached number 39 on the Billboard 200 albums chart and was the highest-selling Latin pop album in 2009. In 2010, Mi Plan won Nelly a Latin Grammy Award for Best Female Pop Vocal Album. In March 2010, Nelly began her Mi Plan tour to promote the album, her first tour throughout Latin America. In November 2010, Nelly released her The Best of Nelly Furtado album, her first greatest hits album, which did include 3 new songs. In between her fourth and fifth studio albums, Nelly Furtado was frequently engaged in philanthropy work outside of being a mom. She held benefit and charity concerts for various organizations, and in September of 2011 pledged $1 million Canadian to the nonprofit Free the Children to build schools in Kenya for girls. In an attempt to re-enter the pop world after dominating it in 2006, Nelly Furtado re-emerged in 2012 with a more hopeful dance pop inspired style. On September 14, 2012, Nelly Furtado released her fifth studio album titled The Spirit Indestructible. Many of the tracks on the album are based on Nelly's trip to Kenya and the inspiring people she's met throughout her life and the joy and humanity they have brought to her. Nelly felt as though people during her Loose era loved her for the wrong reasons, and that in Kenya, people loved her for her humanity and genuine grace. The Spirit Indestructible feels like the most hopeful of Nelly Furtado's albums and more mature alternative pop sound. Unfortunately, The Spirit Indestructible is frequently compared to Loose because it was Nelly's most recent pop album in English up through that point. The Spirit Indestructible received a Metacritic average score of 57 out of 100, signaling overall mixed reviews from critics. The Spirit Indestructible ultimately peaked at number 79 on the Billboard 200 albums chart. Though it did have some chart presence throughout Europe, it was short-lived. After her 5th studio album, Nelly Furtado grew tired of the non-stop touring and record cycles, and so she took a 5-year hiatus from music from 2012 to 2017. She decided to leave the music industry and pursue her personal interests and raise her daughter. In her free time, she was doing things like taking pottery classes, or classes that she found interesting at the University of Toronto. During her hiatus, Nelly was also continuing her philanthropy work, making frequent visits to Kenya with the nonprofit Free the Children. For her 6th studio album, Nelly yet again wanted to pivot within her music. She would give you pop, but on her own terms. Still maintaining a similar sound to Loose, her next album would be more lo-fi indie pop than the mainstream pop at the time. But Nelly was well aware that her next album was unlikely to produce a massive pop hit, and she wasn't wrong. Released on March 31st, 2017, Nelly Furtado's 6th studio album titled The Ride debuted. Her second independent release under her Nelstar Entertainment label, The Ride was slightly better received critically than The Spirit Indestructible, with the Metacritic average score being 64 out of 100. But The Ride didn't chart at all on the Billboard 200 albums chart, which was Nelly's first album to not chart. Since releasing her 6th studio album, The Ride, Nelly Furtado has become a mother of 2 more children, a boy and a girl, with the rapper Haji of the rap collective Odd Future Wolfgang Kill Them All, although Nelly Furtado has stated that she is single. In September 2023, Nelly Furtado, Timbaland, and Justin Timberlake reunited to release their second collaboration 16 years after Give It To Me, titled Keep Going Up. The song peaked at number 84 on the Billboard Hot 100. As a tease for her upcoming 7th album, in May 2024, Nelly released the song Love Bites with Tove Lo, which reached number 2 on the US Dance Mix Airplay chart, but did not crack the Billboard Hot 100. The same day as this video releases, Nelly Furtado's 7th studio album, simply titled 7, will be out as well. Her 3rd release under Nelstar Entertainment, 7 is Nelly's 7th album after a 7-year hiatus from music. I'm hopeful that 7 will be positively received because I want Nelly Furtado to succeed and re-emerge as the pop music titan that the public fell in love with throughout the 2000s. Nelly Furtado holds such a special place in pop culture, and her music was so liberating for so many people. I can remember the old Apple advertisements for the iPod where they would display Loose, and I miss that image of Nelly Furtado so much. But then I'm reminded of my own biases and the extremely high expectations set against women in the music industry, and I come to accept the reality that sometimes the artists I grew up with and fell in love with have also grown up. And so have I. I'm no longer a little kid listening to I'm Like a Bird in the back of a car wishing I could instantly be an adult and grow up and run away and be free. And Nelly Furtado is no longer trying to be the nightclub pop princess with the skinniest waist or the hardest hitting bass. And maybe that's why there seems to be so many people disappointed with Katy Perry's recent reemergence into music. When you have a successful album as a female artist, it can often eclipse the success of future projects. The comment section of Katy Perry's new music is filled with people who want Katy Perry to return to her teenage dream era, and songs like I Kissed a Girl. Even Lady Gaga eventually gave into a more hard-hitting pop album with Chromatica, after years of demands from fans to return to her days of the Fame Monster and Born This Way. And it seems that critics and the public want the same thing out of Nelly Furtado. Ever since Loose, critics have craved that signature pop sound that can only come from the hands of Nelly Furtado and Timbaland. It's undeniably iconic and has some of the best-selling singles of the 21st century. And Nelly knows that nostalgia sells. She knows that sex sells. She just doesn't care. Nelly Furtado has always done music on her own terms, and I don't think her new album will be any exception. The truth is that being successful in the music industry as a woman has a hidden price to pay. Loose brought Nelly worldwide recognition and arguably made her a household name, but it forever branded her as the promiscuous girl. It made people fall in love with a very temporary version of Nelly Furtado, a young, wide-eyed, but naive Nelly. And as much as I wish that Nelly Furtado could give us a loose follow-up album or Man-Eater Part 2, it's just not who she is anymore. It's like asking Britney Spears to give us a 2024 version of Slave for You, or asking Kesha to give us a follow-up album to Warrior. They just aren't those artists anymore. And as difficult as that is to say, that's okay. Part of loving an artist is loving who that artist may evolve into. For some, their favorite musicians go their entire careers without controversy, dying as true artists and legends in their industry. But for others, their favorite artists may become problematic or become overshadowed for their outspokenness and not their music. As a longtime fan of Nelly Furtado, I'm happy that she is living her best life raising her children and doing her philanthropy, unaffected by the limelight and the allure of Hollywood. It's rare to see a musician or a celebrity who isn't enamored with being famous or constantly trying to be relevant. Any artist can replicate past successes to continue profiting off of nostalgia, but that's what comes with being a fan of Nelly Furtado. You accept in the terms and conditions that she makes music that feels genuine, not trendy. And that's what we need more of. Authenticity can't be bought, it can only be fostered. Regardless of the public and critical perception of Seven, the album, or Nelly's future projects, one thing remains true. Nelly Furtado doesn't put her name on a project that she doesn't feel passionate about. Even if she never has another #1 hit to her name, the impact of Nelly Furtado left on pop culture is categorically conclusive. Nelly, never forget that you've got what it takes to set us free. You will always mean everything to me.